Today on episode 67 of the podcast, we will be reviewing The Amateur and episode 8 of Daredevil Born Again. We'll also be giving you the rundown of the top stories of the week, including the Oscars finally adding a stunt category, but it's not going to be coming anytime soon. I'm Brad, he's Josh, and this is We'll Bring the Popcorn.
As always, before we jump into the news this week, please don't forget to give us a like and subscription on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you're getting our episodes when they drop every single Monday. If you're listening to us in the audio room, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the podcast. And as always, go to willbringthepopcorn.com where you can get all of our archive episodes, our social media information, as well as our merch store so you continue to help supporting the podcast in that way. As always, we can't thank you enough for your continued support.
And so we're going to kick the news off this week with the Oscars finally agreeing and saying they're going to add a stunt category. It's going to be Best Stunt Design is what it's going to be called, but it's not happening until, which the wording was a little weird on it. Films released in 2027 will be the first ones eligible for the award, but the Oscars that it will happen at won't be until the 2028 Oscars, which ends up being the 100th Oscars, but it's just... That's a while away, and I get maybe not announcing it this year because we're already 4.5 months into it. So if you're going to say, well, hey, we're going to give a best stunt category for next year, like, well, I don't think you need extra preparation or anything for it, but it's nice to know that that's going to be there. But you have things like Mission Impossible Final Reckoning and a lot of others that could be potential big stunt winners this year are not going to be eligible for it. We may not ever see a Mission Impossible be up for it because this potentially could be the final one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that they're finally getting around to making it a category. It's been one that's been fought for years and has really gotten a lot of push the last several years. I'm glad that they're finally doing it. 2028 seems just kind of like a weird, I don't know if they just feel like it'd be special because it is the 100th Oscars that they're doing it for. I don't get the reason behind pushing it that far out, but at least we're finally getting it. So these people that, work so hard to make these movies look as cool as they do and as believable as they do, and a lot of the, crazy things that these people that do these stunts put their bodies through just to make it look as good as it does, like they're finally getting that recognition. It's going to come in 3 years, and that'll be nice. But I still don't get why they pushed it out that far. Like, this is something you could do. You could do it next year.
You could say right now,
yeah,
okay,
like,
there's an...
It just feels like a goofy thing to push off arbitrarily for 3 years. Like, it's kind of dumb. I'm like, I don't know all the logistics that go into these things, but it feels like something you could have just gone ahead and just said, hey, we're doing it starting next year. And I think everybody would have been just as happy to see it.
Yeah, 2026 Oscars, here's the stunt category done, bam, everything out. But I guess they have to establish exactly what they're going to, like, how they have to review it. So what you're looking for to be able to have the standard, what would be able to get a film nominated for it. I'm sure there's some logistics, but still, it doesn't feel like it should take 3 years to figure that out.
Yeah, it just seems like a silly time frame to put on something, but I'm thankful that it's finally coming. It's been a long time.
It should have been there all along.
Like it's a part of filmmaking. Literally every other part of filmmaking it has an Oscar category. Like everything that goes into making a movie except for stunts. Like it's made no sense that it's never been involved in the Oscars up until now.
Yeah, and like I said, the Fall Guy really showed off what these guys go through, and it was a big proponent of them trying to do another push to get stunt coordinators and stunt actors and stuff. So it looks like it's one general category, so I assume the stunt coordinator would be the main one who would be nominated. Don't know if it'll be shared with any other crew, because you could have a ton of people when it comes to stunts, because you got people setting up the pyrotechnics, the ones actually doing the stunts, the coordinators. There's how many of our actors you have. You could have 30, 40 people, depending on how, like, if it's an Avengers movie, it's going to have 40, 50, 60 stunt actors in it. So, so it looks to me that it's going to probably be the stunt coordinator that gets the main award there. But again, they should, because they put so much of their blood, sweat, and tears into it. Yeah. All of them do. It's finally that the stunt community is getting the recognition they deserve. Hopefully that's going to be added to the other award shows as well, so they can have more than one chance to win something for their work.
Yeah, and hopefully, the other award shows follow suit, because that's something that's been missing for a long time. And we're glad that it's finally happening. Those people put in so much work, like you said, to make this stuff look as good as it does, and it's about time that they're going to finally start getting that recognition they deserve. So we're very happy to hear that. I want to move into our next news story now, and this is one that's very interesting for me. So a lot of video games are getting, film and TV adaptations made for it. We've got, The Last of Us just getting ready to kick off their new season now. Episode 1 will have dropped by the time this episode comes out, so we're excited to check that one out. You've got, the Mario Brothers movies, you've got Sonic, but now we've got news that Hideo Kojima has announced that Michael Sarnowski, who directed A Quiet Place Day 1 and Pig, among other films, is actually going to be directing the live adaptation of Death Stranding for A24 Studios. Death Stranding is a really cool, big game, like a big scope of a game, and I'm excited to see where they take that film now that it's getting a live adaptation for it.
It's going to be really interesting because, if you know Kojima's work, he doesn't do normal kind of things. Like his stories, his aesthetic, everything, even with the Metal Gear Solid series and everything, the story is wild and crazy and out there. And this one was too. It's basically a horror UPS delivery with a baby attached in a incubator kind of thing. Like it's going to be a strange, wild film, but if they can get it right, and it sounds like they got a director that kind of knows how to do interesting stuff. Nicolas Cage calls Pig one of his favorite movies he's ever done, and he's gotten rave reviews and talks, and that film was very well received for being a little quirky, strange, but extremely good film. And Quiet Place Day 1, while you can go back in our archives and see what we thought about it. It was a decent entry. It was filmed well. It was just kind of more of the same story-wise. But I think he's going to be a pretty good guy to take on this game that could be a little difficult to adapt.
Yeah, but I'm confident in their ability to kind of take this. A lot of it comes down to casting and script, right, as it always does. But I'm curious to see who they're going to get play the lead in this, because some people have already thrown around some names, and I forget who that was before coming in to record this, but people are already kind of buzzing about who should play the lead in this movie. But it's an exciting one to get made because, like you said, if they nail it, this is a really cool story concept that you can take and make something really interesting out of it. I love the game. I played quite a bit of it when it came out, and I'm excited to see. I never got to finish it though. That's the one thing. That's one game I wish I'd gone back and finished, but it's a really fun game that, if done right, could make for a really fun film, in my opinion. And I think one that if they nail it right, could be really special. And
we'll see if Norman Reedus does end up reprising his role from the game. There's also a bunch of Easter eggs in the game stuff. So does Conan O'Brien show up in his brief little funny role or something, allow him to play? Like, we'll see if they end up trying to keep the same actors and voice, because pretty much all the characters, for the most part, are modeled after the voice actors that play them. So we'll see if they end up getting to play the same characters in live action. Doesn't always work out that way, but we'll see if that ends up happening. But I want to move us into our next story about Predator. So we've known this year was going to have 2 different Predator films come out, but we didn't know a whole lot about the other Predator film, and now we do. The first trailer's released. It is directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who has done Prey, who's doing Predator Badlands, which is out later this year, but it's an animated anthology film, so you've got 3 different stories of the Predator taking on Vikings, taking on samurai and World War II pilots. So you've got it's 3 separate Predators taking on this throughout time, but it looks really interesting. The trailer looked fun. You've got a guy who kind of brought Predator back with Prey in a new, unique way. And they've kind of talked about how, well, we might just play with that, because Prey, if you haven't watched it yet, go watch it.
Really good.
But it takes place in the past. It's take place with Native Americans and stuff. So you're really dealing with a different time period than we have with Predator. Now we're getting 3 different time periods. Even Predator Badlands, just come out later this year, potentially might be featuring Predator as a good guy. So he's giving us some really interesting different takes on Predator, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, there's a ton of different directions you can go with it. I know some people are kind of joking at the time jumping Predators and all that stuff. Like is it feasible? But the trailer for this, when you get into animation, you can do all kinds of weird stuff and go in a bunch of different directions. It's easier to pull off than doing it in live action, I think. But the trailer looked really cool. I was excited for, that to drop, because like you said, we've gotten next to nothing on what this was going to be about. Like, we've heard some rumblings about like the whole time jump and multiple time periods thing, but didn't know how it was going to practically work. And then we get this, awesome animated trailer that comes out in the middle of the week and just kind of caught us by surprise, because we didn't know anything was coming. And what they gave us is a really cool look at something, and it's coming sooner than we thought. Like, we thought it wasn't going to happen until like significantly later this year, like maybe towards the end of the year, because we knew Badlands was coming later in the year, and this is actually coming out before Badlands, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's dropping on June 6th on Hulu.
Yeah, and it's coming out way sooner than we thought. I mean, it's less than 2 months away from dropping now, so like we're going to get it very quickly. I'm excited to get our hands on that to check it out and see what they do with it. But it looks really interesting. I'm excited to see like where the story goes and how they tell it. Visually, it looks unique and pretty cool and interesting. So I'm excited to check that one out when it finally comes out.
Yeah, it's really fun to be able to take this and just kind of do whatever with it. The first Predator that infamously had Jean-Claude Van Damme in a mantis-like alien costume before he balked, and because he wanted his face and everything else to be seen. He didn't want to be covered up in this suit, and then they ended up coming up with the iconic look and bringing in Schwarzenegger and everything else. And then for Predator 2, you went into the city, because that all took place in the jungle, and then they've kind of jumped around with doing Alien versus Predator, and you've done a few other Predators, which have been okay, but feels like a really good, unique way to do Predator. Just jump around in time, show that these aliens have been around for a long time in different time periods, and see just how they can interact with different worlds and different timelines and everything. And it's really intriguing and interesting to me to take a character that you could keep pumping out the same stuff, but that's the real unique way that you can do something new with it, because it's kind of going to be the same thing if you just keep doing modern city or modern jungle or something else, as just jump around in time with it. So I'm really looking forward to see what they do with the animated anthology and with Badlands later this year, because I think that one's a little more modern setting, but again, it said it's switching up to make Predator potentially a good guy.
Mm-hmm. Which is, I don't know how I feel about that one, just because it's always been presented as kind of like...
Can we get Arnold and the Predator doing the handshake together?
You have to. You got to insert that GIF when we put the episode out. But yeah, it's going to be a different take on it. I'm excited to see what directions they go with it, because there's some fun stories that you could play with and tell when you jump around to time periods. Like, you can make the joke like, oh, if they have current alien technology, they should just be able to wipe out any old school primitive weaponry that they had back then. But it's going to be fun to see how they play with those stories until the time jumps in a way that makes sense. But I'm excited for those when they come out for sure. But it looks like I want to move now into another story that we keep hearing. It's like the Blade of the DC universe, it feels like at this point. But we got word that the potential development of the next Batman Part 2 with Robert Pattinson, the Matt Reeves Batman movie, is potentially going to be delayed again. And this has been a source of frustration for some people, but this time it feels like it might actually fall on Robert Pattinson and not the people making the movie. Like, there's still rumblings that the script isn't even finished yet, but it was supposed to supposedly start filming as soon as later this year. And it sounds like that may not happen, because it appears that Robert Pattinson might be trying to get the role of the main villain in Dune Messiah, which is an interesting, twist on things that have happened. But if that's the case, that's going to push filming Batman even further out, because he wants to jump into Dune. He's obviously doing the Odyssey right now, but man, you throw him into the Dune franchise, and it could put Batman on the back burner, which is kind of surprising, because that's a film that doesn't normally get put on a back burner for anything.
Yeah, because it's been quite a while now since we got the first Batman. Robert Pattinson has joked about, well, when I finally do Part 2, like, I might be like 50 years old by the time we get around to filming it and stuff. But yeah, he's filming the Odyssey, which goes into the summer here, and then Dune Messiah starts in the summer, so he will jump straight from the Odyssey over to Dune, which, again, that's just big for him, though. I mean, you're going from Christopher Nolan to go over to Denis and doing the third Dune film and being the main villain of that. Like, that could be really spectacular, because he is a fantastic actor. Yeah. He's really proved it. Of course, a lot of people still only want to remember from Twilight, but if you haven't seen what he's done since then, he has put out an impressive resume with The Lighthouse and Mickey 17, and you've had Tenet and everything else. Like, he is a really good actor, so to bring him in that already stacked cast, because we even got some actors that barely showed up in 2 that we know are going to be a part of 3 and play a bigger part of that. There's some huge names with Florence Pugh and everything else you're going to be seeing more of in 3. Like, that's going to be a really Odyssey stacked, then Dune Messiah is going to be stacked, And we don't know exactly how long that's going to take him to film that. So yeah, that could push the Batman to either end of 2025 or not even starting until 2026. So you're looking at least 2027, 2028 before we could potentially see the Batman Part 2, which is disappointing. I really loved it. We loved the Penguin series as well. That got the spinoff that gave us a little bit, all right, this will hold you over a little bit. Of course, it didn't have Batman in it, but that world that Matt Reeves created was fantastic, and we want to see more of it. And it does think that we're seeing more and more delays with it.
Yeah, I went back and watched, actually just last week, I went back and rewatched the Batman with him in it, and I think I like it more now than I did when I went and saw it. Like, I enjoyed it when I saw it, and, there's some people that have, opinions on it just because he is who he is playing Bruce Wayne, but I really think they nailed the detective part of Batman in that, and I'm excited to see what they do to follow up. But yeah, this feels like this could be delayed because of Robert Pattinson this time and not just people getting it done. Obviously, get the freaking script done and get the movie ready to be made. That way, when he's ready to do it, you could just jump in and go right into it. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they follow that one up because Penguin left us in a pretty cool spot for Batman to reappear again. If you haven't watched Penguin, go out of your way to watch that show. That show's phenomenal. Go back in our archives and check out what we had to say about the show as we were doing our watch along for it. But man, that was such a good show. And, the world that Matt Reeves has created in there is really, really cool and really good. And I'm excited to see where Batman goes, beyond this.
Yeah, I guess they got some time to finish the script now if he does end up taking this role in Dune, but still, you have pre-production, you have sets, you have everything else you need to build. So if they are going to get it going in late 2025, early 2026, that's got to be locked in by the summer. It's got to be done so they can start building everything that they need to build. Getting the costumes done. Is he going to have a new suit? New Batmobile, everything like that. There's a lot of stuff that has to be made and put into production. If he hasn't turned in a script yet, they don't know what to build. So, yeah, that's problematic, but hopefully it's because he's taking his time and he's going to get the story right and it's going to be fantastic by the time it comes out. But it also makes you a little leery. Are we going to get the trilogy, or could the Batman Part 2 end up being the last one because it's taken so long?
Well, I'm excited for 2030 when we finally get Batman Part 2 and Blade finally made. 2030 is going to be a great year for that.
I love that they're... it does feel like they're poking a little bit at the Blade situation with the films and Marvel Rivals, because you had Blade show up, but he was being held in the castle and stuff, and now they found him again in Marvel Rivals, but he's just laying down taking a nap with a blanket over him. Like, that's got to be a little poke that they're just waiting for Marvel to wake him up.
It's 100% a poke at it, and I'm here for it. It's very funny.
Well, some sad news over on the Amazon side. We had talked about before that Phoebe Waller-Bridge was developing a new Tomb Raider series. Potentially we were going to have Sophie Turner, of course, from Game of Thrones and X-Men Dark Phoenix and everything like that, but it looks like Amazon has killed it. So the executive at Amazon who was overseeing the series and helping run it and everything left the company. That seemed to put a big deterrent in them moving forward with it, but it seems like there hasn't been an official announcement yet, but all signs from everybody who's been involved with it says it's dead in the water.
And that's what happens when you have like corporate turnover and stuff like that. You have like people in higher positions that may be strongly backing certain projects leave the company for one reason or another, and there's no reason to get into that here. But this is a series that had been in the works for a hot minute. Like, they poured quite a bit of money into putting this together.
Tens of millions of dollars already spent.
Yeah, just to get it to not happen. Like it's unfortunate, but I was already kind of feeling a certain type of way about Sophie Turner playing the role of Lara Croft. Like, she doesn't feel like a Lara Croft to me. I don't know why, but I would have given it an opportunity to see if it could change my mind and make it work. I love the Tomb Raider games and, have enjoyed most of the stuff that's been put out for it so far as like film and TV and stuff. I know you and I were talking about our love for the Tomb Raider animated series as well that we enjoyed too, that we went back in our archives and check out what we think about that. But it's rough when you hear these stories that come out of like these people that put a bunch of time and effort and money into this stuff for it to just get scrapped, and you feel for the people working on it and pour their creative hearts and energy into making these projects just for it to get dropped seemingly at the drop of a hat. You know what I mean? And it's unfortunate that we probably won't get to see what was hopefully going to be manifested into this show.
Yeah, because we got the rebooted movie, which kind of took after the rebooted games, the more modern games, which were really popular and stuff. And I didn't think the new movie was that bad. I just think it missed the mark of the drama and the action, the suspense that the new games gave you, because there was dread. There was, you felt that she wasn't this over the top superpowered heroine that she kind of was up to that point, especially if you watch the Angelina Jolie movies of just kind of how which I still enjoy, but they were very those were video games brought to life, and the new Tomb Raider games were much more grounded, and they kind of missed the mark a little bit of it. I think if they would have given that a sequel and kind of focused more of giving us the dramatic high stakes kind of action and drama with that, it could have worked well. But it seems like they really want to do something with Tomb Raider. They just can't figure it out. They said they went through multiple writer rooms. They couldn't get the scripts right. There was just a lot of things that are just working against them, that you're trying to figure out, well, are they going more back towards the early video games? Are they going to go for the modern video games? You know, the new animated series, which ended up being a decent success for Netflix here, did kind of a different tale than they have. So it might have been a little bit, well, we don't want to be like the animated series. We don't want to be like the new games. We don't want to be like Angelina's. We don't want to be like this, that they just couldn't figure out what the identity of the show was going to be.
And that's the hard part of getting creative synergy together to put something out. And it's why it's so impressive when you see like shows that do hit and do take off, how well they've done, like how strong the creative and writing process is and how important it is to the success of a show, because you see time and time again when there's an obvious disconnect, or there feels like a disconnect in that room, that comes across when you see it put to film in whatever form that it takes. It's why it's such it's why I love the medium as much as we do, because when it's right, it's so good and it takes you on an adventure, and you can talk about it and, you know, and experience it and enjoy it and feel it. And you go through all of the emotions and the, you know, the thought provokingness and stuff like that, that can come with, you know, really special creative processes coming together to make something magical like that. It just goes to show how critically important that is. And when you get a jumbled up situation like this sounds like it was, things like this tend to happen where stuff gets delayed or stuff doesn't get it because you can't get people on the same page. And it's tough. That's where it's, you know, my hat's off to the people that go into making these things, because it takes the cliche is it takes a village, but it really does in this case. And it's unfortunate that they never could seem to get on the same page with it either.
It's also a difficult climate right now in Hollywood because of budgets getting out of control and films and shows not making kind of back what they thought they would. They're spending $300-400 million on stuff, and they're getting 5 million viewers, and that's just not cutting it for how much money they're spending on it. And we've got some, you know, Amazon hasn't been cheap on what they've been spending. You know, they have the Ring of Power series, where they've spent billions of dollars on doing. They're willing to spend the money, but things have got to be done right, which makes me a little more hopeful for the James Bond stuff. Just like they're not just going to throw stuff out. They still want to do it, because Reacher has been so good. I just ended up finishing the last season of it, which of course season 4 is already greenlit for that, and we have a new season of Rings of Power coming. They've put out some good shows. It shows that they're not willing just to throw something out there just to throw it out there, even if it's a big IP, which Tomb Raider still has its appeal, and you know, the movie didn't pull in a ton, but it's still got its appeal that it could be something profitable in this day and age. Just something just didn't work out right.
Yeah, and we'll see if something eventually gets, you know, back in the fold for that, or they restart it, reboot it, and do something else with it. Time will tell, and we just kind of got to wait and see what happens with it.
Jason Momoa for Lara Croft.
Might as well. He's doing just about everything else. Speaking of coming back to Dune, right? He mentioned that he was coming back to...
But wait.
To do more.
A lot of people are like, wait, didn't you die in the first movie? Have you read the books?
Right.
That was his response to it. Yeah. Have you read the book?
Read a book. Quote from Jason Momoa, which is very funny for different reasons. But I want to move into another news story this week that was, you know, it really hits for me because, you know, I've anybody that knows me knows that I love, you know, hard rock, heavy metal music. I listen to a pretty wide variety of genres of music, but like my heart's always been in like rock and metal music. And the band that really got me into heavier music is getting their own Netflix docuseries made about them. And it's the band Korn, you know, very popular, you know, early 90s to now. Even now they're still playing, you know, amphitheaters and, you know, arenas across the world and selling out everywhere they go. They're getting a docuseries about them on Netflix. It's going to be a 3-part a 3-part series that chronicles pretty much their entire 30-year career at this point, and it's coming out in 2026, and I could not be more excited about it.
It says it's even going to touch on the dark parts of the drug use and the bad times and everything else, and I hope it goes into like their music videos and stuff like that, and just talking about what went into them, because if you knew Korn and you knew their music videos back in the day, they had some of the most inventive, crazy, just insanely to look at videos that you could put out. Like, they really put a lot of production into some of their bigger hits and stuff. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. I enjoy Korn as well, but to get a 3-part documentary is kind of crazy. Like, if you don't know that much about Korn, you would think, how could there be 3 parts enough to talk about this band? But there's a lot to talk about over the different members and everything they've been through. And like I said, it's a 30-year career, so there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, so you got, a history of drugs, mental issues that comes out very much in their music and their lyrics. Especially Jonathan Davis has been very vocal about his, mental struggles over the years, and, drug use and all the things, how it's affected his personal life and the inner band workings of members leaving and then coming back. And, there's a lot of history to dive into with that band. It's been 30 years. It really helped influence, a modern metal sound that, very much went from, thrash metal and hair metal to, there's a switch to grunge for like darker, birdier music, but then you went a step further and made it heavier with, bands like Korn really revolutionizing that quote unquote new metal sound that you hear. And they were like the defining band for that genre. And it's going to be really exciting to see that series, because there's a lot of history there, and I'm excited to see what directions they go and what's, how deep a dive they go into this band if it's getting a 3-part series for it. And I'm very excited to see that when it comes out.
And so I want to jump us into our last story of the week, which is kind of a big grouping of stuff. There's a lot of sequels and new films and stuff that were talked about that are coming. And to no surprise anybody, the Minecraft movie, they've already been in heavy discussions that they're going to already greenlight a sequel and move forward. Sure. That nothing has been signed for it yet, but they're like, it's just working out the details of it, but it's already made so much money. And I do disagree slightly with Jared Hess, who came out saying just let the kids have fun in the theaters, because they're destroying the theaters with the popcorns and the drinks and the live chickens and everything else. Because he came out and talked about, why are police being called? Well, most theaters anymore have a police presence there. Even when we go, they're there on opening days, but these kids are destroying it. You have workers who are not getting paid that much. You have to spend extra time. They don't get much time to clean it. Like, they are ridiculously going over the top, and because we're giving attention to it, they're doing it even more. You have more and more videos of kids acting fools in the theaters. I'm glad they're going to the theater and they're having fun, but we shouldn't really be. I know the reason why he's saying it, because, hey, that's going to put more people watching the movie.
Sure.
But you got to teach your kids to be respectful. There's several movie theater chains now who have said they're not allowing anybody under 18 years old attend the film without a parent, because of how many problems they've been having with these screenings. And it's mostly teenage boys buying the biggest, gigantic thing of popcorn that they can and just throwing it when it gets to the chicken jockey scene.
Which is wild at some of those videos. But yeah, very successful movie, though, at the end of the day. Very commercially successful. It even beat most everybody's prediction on how well the movie would do coming out. Like, we knew it would do very well. It topped
Barbie.
Like, it beat Barbie. And Barbie was a huge, huge film, huge cultural juggernaut, and it beat it. It's like when you put it in opening weekend conversations of films like Infinity War and Endgame, you're onto something huge, because those are 2 of the biggest movies of all time. Mm-hmm. And its opening weekend was on par with those films. Like, it came in, just behind those.
Yeah, 3rd highest April opening of all time.
Which is crazy to think about, but that's how well this movie did. And I love to see the commercial success of it. You could have a separate conversation about theater etiquette, and we talk about it all the time, the people's lack of decorum in certain movies where they just go and they feel like it's their time to have a conversation. Like, this is a whole other level to that of just, wrecking theaters. And
there's having fun, but there is a line.
There's having fun, and then there's being a jerk. And then that's just people just going in and being absolute jerks. And that's terrible. But I don't want to go into that too deep either, because that's we could do a whole episode on theater etiquette and things like that. And we can make a whole a whole list of things that how people should act, but that's, that's not our place to talk about here, I guess, necessarily. But good for Minecraft. Like we kind of knew going and seeing it and seeing how packed it was, and the way they teased at the end of the film, the second film that was going to come, and the new characters that could be introduced, and it was a no-brainer that it was going to get a second movie.
You also have a new Oceans film moving forward, but this one's going to be a prequel set in the past. It will have Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling in it, so they're reuniting in a different film. It's going to be set during the Grand Prix, the 1962 Grand Prix, and it's about a married couple teaching their kids kind of how to grift rich people. So it could be a lot of fun. I mean, you're getting those two back together. They had a lot of good chemistry in Barbie and everything else. So we'll see how it goes to being an ocean heist film and how that really works out for them. But I'm looking forward to see what they can do with that.
That'll be a license to print money for sure.
Mm-hmm. We also have Drew Goddard, who wrote Daredevil, The Martian, Cabin in the Woods, is developing a new Matrix movie. We still are very sparse on the story points to it, what it's going to be about, but this will be the first real Matrix movie that has been done without the Wachowskis. So we're going to see potentially something new. Of course, the fourth film was very mixed among people. Like, it looked good overall, but the story was a little bit like, did we really need to revisit this? So we don't know if this is going to be a reboot or remake, if it's going to take place in a different timeline of it, but we've got someone new taking over the Matrix.
Hopefully it is a brand new story in a different time, away from Neo, doing a different story. Like, I think they beat that story to death at this point, in my opinion, but we'll see what direction they go, and you got new people at the helm. We'll see what direction they want to take it in.
John Wick wake up and realize that he's been in a simulation the entire time?
Why not? But if we could go with something new, that would be preferred.
We also got Beetlejuice 3 is moving forward. So Beetlejuice did extremely well for what they thought. We reviewed it. You can go back and archive see, but it was a fun overall. It had some story elements that just didn't really make sense to it, but hopefully it tightens it up and it makes for a really good third film. But I had fun with the second one, and they're already moving forward with the third.
Yeah, I can see that happening. They probably want to make that sooner rather than later, and not the almost 30 years it took between the last one and this one. So it's not surprising that they're making another one.
We've heard about for a while. It's got an animated series. We talked about it. Next season is premiering. Actually premiered last week. Is Gremlins is getting another feature film. We again don't know many details about it, but it's getting another sequel. So that one was a kind of weird one because it was I loved it, but as a kid, it scared the crap out of me. But it's like a PG movie, but it's basically a kid's horror film. And so we'll see exactly where that goes and how, if they're doing like a modern remake and going to make it darker, if it's going to be more kid friendly. But it's going to be really interesting what they can do with Gremlins. Hopefully they still stay practical in doing practical puppetry for all the creatures with it.
They should. That movie was a lot of fun when we were younger. I've gone back and watched it fairly recently. I think within like the last 6 months, I threw it on. It might have been a little bit before Christmas that I put it on, just because we have the fun "what movie is a Christmas movie" conversation. But I'm pretty sure I watched it before Christmas. But it doesn't hold up the best, I don't think. But it's still a fun movie, and we'll see where they go with it. I'm not sure what direction they want to. It's going to have to be in a modern update, but we'll see how they apply that to current times.
It's another one that took me until I was an adult to realize Howie Mandel was the voice of Gizmo.
Gizmo, yeah.
Like, wait, that was Howie? Like, okay.
It's crazy. He still does it so well.
Oh, yeah.
He actually did it fairly recently, and I heard him do an impression.
Doing that and Bobby from Bobby's World and doing those impressions still.
Crazy how good it still sounds.
Because, hey, you could still have Howie come back and be Gizmo and keep that voice the same.
I'm sure he would. I'm sure he would do it in a heartbeat, but we'll see what gets made of that for sure.
Yeah, one of the oddest films that they announced is getting a remake, and this is in the category of do we really need it, is the Kevin Costner Whitney Houston classic, mainly because of Whitney Houston and her performance of the songs in that film, is a Bodyguard. Is this one that we really like, hey, everyone's clamoring to get a remake of the Bodyguard?
I'm going to come out and say it, no, we don't need it. Like, that's one of the best soundtracks of all time. Whitney is an incredible vocalist, one of the best vocal performers of all time. Hands down, fight me in the comments, you're gonna lose. But this one, leave that one alone. Like, does that need another? You could do a different type of movie, but like, don't mess with that one.
Who's really going to be able to step into her shoes? I mean, you got Ariana Grande, who could do it. You've got maybe Jennifer Hudson or Kelly Clarkson if you go a little bit different way with it, but you're trying to match what Whitney Houston, and you can't match Whitney Houston.
Yeah, that one, just leave that one alone. Come up with something else. You don't need to. Is there an audience for that?
Because most people, I don't think was really about the film itself. Like, I've watched it, and I couldn't tell you about the film, but I could tell you about the soundtrack.
Yeah, the film was fine. Soundtrack, iconic, one of the biggest soundtracks of all time. It might still be the best-selling soundtrack of all time. I could be wrong on that, but it's definitely up there. But definitely one of the best, just for how incredible Whitney was in that. And then her, cover of Dolly Parton's "I Will Always Love You" is just one of the best, if not the best cover ever made.
Yeah, and with Andor coming up, this is the last story I wanted to talk about. The Andor coming up, there's been a lot of talk and chatter about Star Wars and stuff, and it was mentioned that Lucasfilm actually has a Star Wars horror project in the works. So, again, we don't know much details, but if we're getting something Star Wars horror related, it could be pretty interesting. We'll see exactly how dark they go. Maybe it's a little more menacing than horror, but if they're looking towards that genre, it's going to be really interesting to do. We've had Marvel go with the zombies. Do we get some sort of Star Wars zombies, or do we go, something darker where there's a serial killer in the Star Wars land or something else? Like, there's a lot of interesting ways you could try to do horror within Star Wars.
Almost like a Phantom Menace, if you will, right? You said it menacing, so that's a terrible joke. But no, like, I'm genuinely surprised they haven't gone, like, somebody hasn't tried to do something similar to this yet. Like, it hasn't been developed, because there are ways you can make Star Wars terrifying. Like, you have Siths, you have, if you want to do your, Darth Jar Jar movie or whatever.
Give me Darth Jar Jar more.
Like, I know, I'd said that just to pop you, because I know it would. But, like, I'm genuinely surprised they haven't actively tried to make something like this, because you can make Star Wars horror fairly easily, in my opinion. So I'm excited to see what they try to put together for this, because there's some really cool things you could do that I'm curious to see if they actually go that direction.
Yeah, as we know, it's going to take place outside of probably the main
storylines.
It's going to be a one-shot offshoot on probably a planet you've never heard of with characters you don't really know. And do we get a cabin in the woods Star Wars style or something?
Something farther away than what we already are used to from it. But yeah, we'll be interested to see how that develops. I want to move us now into our movie review of the week. So we have The Amateur. So this is starring Rami Malek as Charlie Heller, who works for the CIA. He's like a decoder. He's, responsible for, gathering information for, the people that work above him that, make the big decisions and stuff. And this, the premise of this story, and we're going to go into spoilers when we talk about this, but the premise of the story is his wife goes on a trip to London. He is notorious for not wanting to take risks, not wanting to, go out and experience things. And she invites him to go to London with her, and he decides not to, but then come to find out that when she goes to London, she is taken captive by these people and unfortunately killed in the crossfire of that. And, this is all about, him coming to terms with that and plotting his revenge for the people that murdered his wife. And it's a really interesting story, and I'm excited to kind of break this down and talk about it.
Yeah, because he's trying to ask him, what are you going to do about this? I want the people found that killed my wife. And they're like, yeah, we'll take care of it. You let us handle it. But he doesn't. He's going through files and cameras, and he's looking. You get the very kind of a deep side of the technical aspect of the espionage spy stuff, of how they can access people's information and find people and access all the cameras around everywhere, especially on, the main action where his wife died. As you said, take place in London. They said there's like 3,000 cameras or something around there. So it's showing you how they can access all the stuff, creating 3D models based off of different angles and stuff. It was really interesting for the tech geeky type of people who like that, because it's got some action, but it's more into that technical detail of how can you have a guy who is scrawnier and smaller and a more technical geeky guy, how does he go on getting revenge for these people? And I thought it was pretty interesting the way they went about it, because it shows the human side of a guy he's really upset about what happened. And you have the government is kind of failing him. His work is failing because they're like, well, we're not going to do it, but we end up learning some deeper reasons on why stuff isn't getting done. But I thought it was really interesting how they approached a lot of the scenarios, especially when he finally starts going out after all of the, I think it's a group of 4 that he's going after, that he has pinpointed and already told, like within a night, he's found all their information and presents it to his boss. But his boss is like, yeah, you just leave it to us.
Yeah, one thing I really appreciate that they do in this movie is they don't make Rami Malek into like he's not Jason Statham in The Working Man. Like, he's not this unkillable, unstoppable hero in this. It's very much taking the approach of the practical, nerdy science guy who has no combat training, no like advanced, dark ops special forces training, trying to stop people who are very much like of leagues ahead of him in their ability to, fight and, protect themselves and, and various things like that. And they do it in such a practical way that it's like, it makes sense. Like, they lean heavy into his scientific knowledge and his brain, because he uses his brain to come up with ways to stop these people. And you learn very quickly, like, as challenged as he is physically in terms of fighting, it plays out practically in a way, because like he tries in his mental, rampage brain that he's on he tries to go at somebody and it doesn't work. Like, he can't outfight anybody, so he has to outsmart them. And it's written very smart, and I kind of appreciate that approach, because it could have just turned into, he's unstoppable in his revenge and he finds creative ways to do it. No, they approach it in a very practical way that it's like, okay, this guy's got no training. We can't have him just whoop somebody in a fight and that be done. Like, it's not believable. And I appreciate that approach.
Yeah, because they did a good setup that, Charlie ends up finding out he's got this deep operative that he talks to that gives him information, and they end up giving him a ton of information that showed corruption within the CIA. And he uses that information as blackmail to his bosses to get something done, and demands, okay, I won't release it if you send me off for training. He also says, I've got a dead man switch and everything else, so I've got to be doing this. And so the CIA is over here trying to search everything to find everything, while he's sent to Lawrence Fishburne's character Henderson at the CIA training ground to learn how to shoot and fight. And of course he is. And I enjoyed those scenes because it does show you he's not turning into a Jason Statham character or a Jason Bourne. He's not going to be a killer. They're showing him at the range and he can't shoot anything unless he's point blank. And Lawrence Fishburne says, yeah, as long as you're right next to him, it's pretty hard to miss. So I still give you a 50-50 shot of hitting something when you're that close. But you get a really intense scene where he makes Charlie point a gun at his chest with his finger on the trigger, and he just can't do it. And he's like, you're not a killer. Like, no matter how much I train you or try, you're not a guy who's really capable of doing that. But as we learn and as we find out, like, and it really pays off in the end when he has a conversation with the last person that he's gone after, because it shows like, you, in your mind, you didn't kill any of these people the way you're setting traps and doing everything else. Is like, you gave them a way out. You gave them a way to run and escape, and they still perish because of it. But in your mind and your heart, that's your way of being able to say, well, I didn't really kill them. They had a chance to escape. They had a chance to live. It just didn't happen, which I appreciated that aspect, because, you're not taking a guy who is a geeky, nerdy, computer technical guy and turning him into something he's not. He's a guy who's heartbroken over his wife passing, and he wants something done about it, and he goes about it in the way he can. And that makes logically sense to him, because he tries to do things in a way that a killer, an assassin, or someone would, and he fails miserably at it.
Yeah, like you said, he tries to attack people, and it's not, but he uses his brain to get himself out of tight situations, and the way he gets revenge on the first person is just it was so funny. But I'm not gonna go into individual details about the first one. The first one had me cackling just because it's like, I could definitely see a situation where that would happen, and that would be like how they.
And it made sense to a guy who doesn't really know what he's doing for. Like, well, I'm going to attack you in this way.
Kind of lucks into something happening, and it's just so funny. But I'm just like, you know what? That makes sense, because this is his like first taste of revenge, and it's like, it's not going to go the way he probably envisioned it going. But Yeah, like the writing in this was really smart. I really enjoyed, the way they presented this story because, like you said, the easy out could have been he goes and gets a little bit of training and now he's a stone cold killer because the training takes and he's a natural at it. And no, he's not. He's very much not. And they lean very heavily into the fact that he's not.
Or you could have done something where, well, I can calculate the trajectory of a bullet, so I know if I point it at this angle,
and they didn't go
release a trigger here that you could be going way too technical on how he could be a proficient marksman or something. But it made it more realistic.
Yeah, they didn't go too over the top with it, but you see the confidence that he has starting to increase a little bit over time too, with what he's doing and how he's approaching getting to and getting revenge on everybody, and it was just a really well told story, man. I really dug it. It was written in a way that was practical and it made sense. Rami Malek is fantastic as an actor anyway, but he really plays this character really well of this, smart guy who's heartbroken over the loss of his wife. He's coming to realize that maybe he should have taken more chances with his life and, gone outside of his comfort zone a little bit because there's the backstory of his wife getting an old school plane for him to, put back together and get up in the air so he can get his head in the clouds and get his feet off the ground a little bit and let him, stop being so practical about everything. But it was a really neat little backstory about him, and him coming to that realization a little bit by the end of the movie was very smart and very well written. That they used this avenue to kind of push him in that direction, and it was fun. I really enjoyed it.
And you got Rachel Brosnahan, who of course is going to be our Lois Lane in the next Superman movie this summer here, playing his wife Sarah. And I do like they still included, because a lot of her stuff happens within the first 10 minutes of the film.
Sure.
But you get this kind of tortured moments with him where he's sitting alone in a room and he's lost in his mind. This is anybody who's ever lost anybody, how you can get lost in your mind. And he's seeing her in a club and just coming up and giving him a kiss and seeing him in different scenarios. And it's very realistic to those who have lost somebody. I haven't lost my wife or anything like that, or someone that close to me. I lost my dad and a few friends and other stuff like that, but it's very real of that pain that you're going through. You can see their face everywhere. You can hear their voice. You can feel their presence around you and stuff. And I really appreciate it. Like, Rami is a fantastic actor. I could see some people maybe feeling his performance is a little wooden, but because he's very kind of non-emotional in it. But if you know a tech geeky person, that's kind of their personality. They're very quiet, sullen. They're not showing you a whole lot of stuff. He gets times where he's showing emotion and stuff, but I could see where some people could find it maybe a little wooden, just because he doesn't show that much emotion. Like, he's got the kind of he's got the same facial expressions through most of the film with things. And I do want to touch on one, and this is going to be kind of a big spoiler for one character in the film, because I kind of felt like it was underused, and I was really looking forward to see what he did in the film. But John Bernthal is in the movie as Jackson the Bear O'Brien. He's we set up in the beginning of the film that he's an operative who bounces around. He does different stuff. You feel he's an assassin, a guy who's taking people out and stuff. But, he's very friendly with Rami's character, Charlie. Yeah. And, they meet in the very beginning and they're talking like buddy. And like, hey, what are you doing for lunch? And you can see him like, oh, hey, nothing really. Well, I need you to work on my computer for me. And again, if you know anything about tech, everybody asks you, no matter what, can you fix something for me? Yeah. So that was fun, but we didn't get anything else of his character into the very end, which I love the speech and I love that conversation they had. But his character was, if it wasn't in the movie, it really wouldn't have made a difference to the movie, which is disappointing because we love John Bernthal. We've talked about how much we love him and everything. Like, we felt like I just wanted to see more of it. But I mean, they were two fun conversations. One, the first one more lighthearted, the other one more deep and heart to heart and everything. But his character, unfortunately, just didn't have much to do in the movie at all. Yeah, I mean, his character wasn't necessarily needed too much. I think it was brought back in that scene that you're mentioning towards the end of the movie, where it's just kind of helping him refocus and recenter and just kind of like, hey, like, get it together kind of speech that he gives him. And
it works and it has a purpose. But yeah, I mean, it's John Bernthal. We want to see John Bernthal in everything. You could put him in everything and we'd watch it. But
you could potentially have had Henderson do that same conversation with him, like he's tracked him down again and have, because Henderson in the movie does have a back and forth. Like he feels sympathetic to the guy, but he's got his orders that he has to carry out. But you can tell he's holding back and not doing what he really could. So you potentially could have just had Henderson do that second speech. The first one wouldn't have been the same, but the second conversation, you could have ended up having Henderson do that.
Yeah, and it may have had the same effect.
It just mainly I wanted to see more John Bernthal.
Well, of course, that's that's a valid criticism of anything, even when he's not in a film. You're like, you know what, he could have made this.
This movie could have used Barbie. We needed more John Bernthal.
He would have been so good in Barbie. He really would have. Like, it would have been fun seeing him in there as like
Combat Ken,
as more of a combat Ken. Absolutely. But yeah, it was. I really enjoyed this, man. It was fun. Like I said, I really enjoyed the more practical approach to a guy who's not your typical trained assassin, trying to go out and get revenge on these people who are very much well trained in working these dark ops, and just people that there's no way he could go head on towards and have any chance of winning and being successful. And how they approached his revenge story, like it was fun. It was something we're not totally used to seeing, and it was written in a way that I think really worked.
Yeah, I think it can be a little predictable at times. Like, it's not going to be anything that you don't exactly know what's coming, but it's done in a way that you feel so sympathetic to his character and everything, that you're along for the journey, that it doesn't really matter, that it's you kind of can tell what's going to happen with stuff, because you also have that subplot that gets a little deeper as you go into the movie with that informant that he's had. He finally meets up with them and finds out the backstory of that. But it was a nice little touch, because you've got a kinship between two people who are doing things because of people they have lost. So you get to see two people in two different areas, but they're still dealing with the trauma in different ways, because they're both just trying to figure out, well, how can I use what I know and what I can do to help not only myself, but other people and all that. But it is very predictable, but I didn't mind, because I was enjoying the story. I was enjoying kind of this tale of a guy who's just so heartbroken he's willing to do something out of his character, but they didn't break his character enough to show you that, oh yeah, he's just a combat killer now and he can do whatever. All the dispatches that he ends up doing in the film, it makes some sense, and you get to see a little bit darker of him towards the end, but the very last one gives you, okay, this is exactly, everything was plotted and it was calculated and everything was like worked out exactly how I wanted. He got what he needed out of it without fully damaging his soul and everything that he was trying to do.
Yeah, and sometimes predictable is not a bad thing. In a good story like that, predictable is good. Like, it's fine. You don't want to be thrown. I don't like the plot twist for plot twist's sake. Yeah. I saw some criticism of that, like, this film needed a real strong plot twist. It really didn't, though. Like, it wasn't that type of espionage kind of film. Like, the only twist could have been maybe the director was in on it the whole time. Sorry to spoil that for you, but like that's really the only place where a twist could have happened. Like, I can't see like any other twist making sense in a film.
Throw in maybe his wife was working with these terrorists or something. That would have just actually really killed, or she didn't actually die, or something else. Like, that just would have really sullied the moment emotional impact.
Yeah, and it was so unnecessary. Like I said, sometimes predictable can be a good thing, and this, like I said, it was very well laid out the entire time. It was easy to follow along. It was easy to do it, and it stuck the landing at the end. I mean, that's kind of what you wanted in your story at the end of the day anyway. And, like I said, sometimes predictable is good. There's nothing wrong with that when it makes sense and is done right.
Yeah, and then, of course, you throw in Lawrence Fishburne, who plays kind of a typical Morpheus type of character. He's just the guy who knows everything, combat guy, and you kind of get him throughout the film in some interesting, fun ways, but allows Rami's character, especially like the one bar. You get some comedic elements, but it's not comedic elements that take you out of it. Like when the first time that he's chasing down Rami and he's like drinking heavily in a nightclub and just trying to deal with the torture and the trauma and stuff that he's going through, and he sees Henderson there and so they go on this chase. But it's kind of like the old horror movie chases where your hero is running as fast as they can, but the killer is just walking and moving slowly, and they know exactly where you're going at all points because he's a very calculated guy. Like, hey, I know that this is the kind of stuff you would be searching out because this is the type of person you are. This is a trauma you're going through. This is where I found you at. I know where you're going to be. But, he ends up getting the last laugh. Like, well, you were able to follow me. You were able to find out a lot about me. But did you know about this? Oh,
kaboom.
And he runs and gets away. Like, it was comedic, but it felt kind of very smart because it's a guy like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, but there are some things I know, so I set a trap.
To be dangerous. Yeah, and it's fun though because I love that you throw in the whole horror movie thing because it's like it's the classic trope of killer moves in a straight line. These other people are scrambling. They want it back to it's almost like they circle back to a fixed point, and there's the killer waiting on them. Like they know where they're going to be. It was a really fun little touch, and it feels like he's walking very slowly. You don't see him panic and move, and then you got Rami running around and making his way back over to here. Well, as he's running around doing this, he's just literally walking.
I'll dive in this building. I'll dive down this alley. I'll go here. I'll go here. I'll go here. I'll go here. He won't find me. He just walks right in the door 2 seconds later.
Yeah, and there he is after he was running for his life. And one of my favorite tropes in these types of movies is, I like to call it infinite stamina. Mm-hmm. Infinite stamina button. Like these people who in no practical way or terms could just run for miles and miles and miles. Unlimited ammo and unlimited stamina. It's the fun video game cheat codes that you get in these types of movies where these people could just run and run and run and run and run, and they're never like super out of breath or super tired or need a minute when they get there. It's a really fun trope that I like.
Yeah, I really enjoyed The Amateur in the end. It gave us a solid, heartfelt story that you could connect to even if you don't have a spouse or anything else. You can connect to the trauma and the things that he's going through. I think it was well acted. It was well shot. There was nothing really that stood out to me about being too bad. Again, it's predictable. But it's not predictable in a bad way. It's just what's going to happen, but you still go along for the ride.
Yeah, and stories like that are perfectly fine, and I love that about it. I love that it's not taking itself too seriously, but it's just a good smart movie, man. I really dug this one. Yeah, man. At the end of the day, The Amateur is this really fun adventure that you go on. It's a smart, well written revenge story, and I love the fact that they wrote it in such a way that it makes sense that this guy just doesn't become this, cold-blooded, stone-cold assassin. He has to go and find these practical ways to get his revenge. Ton of fun. Love Rami Malek. Just the action is good when it gets there. It's a little slow in plotting it at the beginning, but when it really kicks into it, I think we get a really fun movie. For those reasons, I'm gonna give it about a 7 out of 10 for me. Like I really dug this movie a lot, but like you said, there's a little bit of a pacing problem at the beginning, but I think when you get there, the writing really brings it up for me that this is a film that, like I said, doesn't take itself too seriously, but writes it in a way that's very believable for, the type of character that Rami Malek plays to get his revenge. And for that reason, I'll give it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm probably going to give it like a 7.5. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, it is very predictable in ways. It is kind of slow. You have to be more into the technical side of the spy action espionage because it does have action, but most of it revolves around checking cameras and security and documents and all that. So it's much more for the technical side. It is a bit slow at times, but overall, everyone gives a good performance. It has a solid story. It'll pull at your heartstrings a bit. It doesn't get too emotional for you, but it does enough just to get you to feel for our main character and the ploy and everything's going through. So I would give it a solid 7.5.
Yeah, those are solid scores for it. It's a film that I really enjoyed. If it's a movie that we definitely recommend going and checking out in the theater. It's got a lot of fun appeal. Going and see it in that medium as well. I don't know where it's tracking yet, box office wise. It's probably not going to beat Minecraft, because that's kind of a juggernaut right now. But I think it's going to do fairly well. I think box office wise, it's going to do pretty solid numbers.
It's what I think it deserves to be seen on the big screen. So The Amateur is in theaters now. We do recommend going and checking it out. It's a little bit different than your typical spy espionage, even though it is predictable. It's more on the technical side with stuff, and you're really going on this emotional journey of revenge, other than just a high octane action revenge film.
Yeah, and if you're a fan of Rami Malek, he gives another really good performance in this one as well. He kind of does a lot of the heavy lifting in this movie for good reason, but he's definitely showcasing his chops here, and he plays a really good version of this techie, nerdy guy, going out for revenge for the loss of his wife. It was a really fun journey that we got to take on this one.
So I'm going to move us into our TV breakdown of the week, which is the 8th episode of Daredevil Born Again. We have one more remaining after this. So, as typically these episodes do, it brings you in to really pushing it forward to that finale. So we got a lot of movement, a lot of stuff going on in this episode. We get more of Bullseye here. So we get Bullseye in prison, but we learn that he's been moved to Gin Pop, so he's getting put in with everybody else so he can be beat up or anything else that could possibly happen to him. And we do learn, again, all of our reviews of Daredevil Born Again are heavy spoilers. We're talking about everything just because we want to talk about everything because we've enjoyed this show so much. But yeah, we end up learning that Fisk was the one behind moving him around because he wants to, well, we think it's Fisk that's moving him around because they want him taken out. So we've got a little bit of a mystery. Is it Vanessa? Was it Wilson? Was it the right-hand man? Like, exactly who was pulling the strings? And a lot of this stuff was played here because we potentially learn that Vanessa was part of something else. And, we learned that there's even more corruption even between Vanessa and Wilson, that they're still kind of doing their own thing because Vanessa really questions Wilson on, hey, why did you decide that you were going to kind of ruin the good thing we had? And he's like, not ruin, but evolve. Like transform it, into something new by being mayor. Like, hey, we had a criminal enterprise here. Why did you become mayor? Yeah,
we were killing the game. Why did you go bring us even more into the spotlight? And there's the fun dynamic of that playing out. So we jump into this really head first, man. There's no messing around. Like you said, you get the visuals of Bullseye right out the gate, getting moved into general population out of solitary confinement, and his concern about that. He feels like in his mind he should be a free man. Like that'll play out a little bit later when we go to talk about it. But we jump right into Wilson and Vanessa having that conversation. While he's taking Vanessa into this building, and you come to find out this is the building where he's been holding Adam for the last several episodes. So Adam is still very much alive. Like Wilson didn't kill him in their showdown. Like it was kind of alluded to, like he may have killed him in that fight, but come to find out he's not. He's very much alive, and he is in the same holding cell that he's been in. And, they have... before they jump in, though, we kind of get a little bit of a thread pulled on the mystery that we had at the end of the last episode as to who wasn't. Like, did Wilson and Vanessa work in cahoots on the whole Lucas situation where he goes and shows up, and come to find out they were very much in cahoots about that. Vanessa, makes the comment that, hey, he was a punk kid trying to make a power move. It was kind of pathetic. So she served him up on a silver platter for him. And you get that resolution very quickly, which I appreciate that they didn't waste around and they just jumped right into it. But you go down, you see Adam in this holding cell. You get Adam pleading to be let go. I won't say anything, but if you know anything about the Fisks, they don't like loose ends. So, or not being able to have people under their thumbs. So unfortunately, Adam meets a very brutally violent end to his life at the hands of Vanessa with a gun. And that was kind of surprising that she was the one that kind of ended that thread herself. And they kind of come to like an understanding, like, hey, we're good now kind of thing. And they go to move forward. But are they really good? They kind of been toying that line, quite a bit in this season. So it's interesting to see that moving forward too in the rest of the episode.
And even this episode and this whole season is making me thankful that they did bring her back as Vanessa. She's fantastic playing that. Just seeing the darkness slowly creep out of her. Like, Fisk is kind of on display. He's a bad guy. You can see when his rage comes out, but Vanessa's always been a very subdued, soft character. And you get to see much more darkness and stuff coming out of her. But we also get a lot with Heather and Matt's relationship in this episode because, their relationship is kind of coming to a point here that they're kind of butting heads. So we get that conversation that, Heather believes she saved herself. Daredevil didn't have anything to do with it. So Matt, of course, is defending Daredevil and all that. And it gets pretty heated until a knock on the door happens, and it's Fisk's right-hand man comes to his apartment to give Heather a letter, and Matt and his spider sense immediately starts seeing, like, how did you know she was here? This is my apartment, not hers. I mean, we may she stays over a lot, but like, how did you know? And that starts off a big argument between them because Matt finally learns that Fisk is a client, and Matt freaks out. He's warning her she cannot have anything to do with the Fisk. She cannot be a part of this, and she this and that, and just goes off on him, and it ends up, which I think was one of the points that really sets Matt over the edge, is that she says Daredevil is no different than Muse, and you can see Matt just like, oh, no, you didn't. Like, Daredevil is a hero. He's saving people. Muse killed people. It's like, they're the same.
Yeah, coming from the same type of need for validation. They play a real fun. She very much plays heavy into the psychological aspects of things, like heavy into this, the psychic headspace that vigilantes operate in. She feels they all come from the same, the same type of person, the same type of need. It doesn't matter whether you're good or bad, you're kind of all lumped into the same category, which very much, sends Matt into a little bit of a rage. And you really get a heavy dose of Matt spiraling in this episode because he's just all emotionally out of sorts right now. Like, you get his realization that, Bullseye's been moved to general population, which sends him into another freak out, which, you got the falling apart of his relationship right now at home too, still trying to balance his, professional life, where he goes into the office where they have this all hands meeting called in, and he berates a client that, he knows is ripping people off, but he gives this really impassioned speech to Kirsten, like when they have a sidebar conversation where he's a little bit exasperated by the work that he's doing as Matt Murdock as opposed to doing as Daredevil. So you're kind of seeing that swing really hard back into leaning into Daredevil fully, where he's like, this work that I'm doing as a lawyer, is it even mattering? It was a really powerful, it's a conversation, but it's more like a monologue that he's giving, where he's saying, hey, like, we defend, this person and this person, like we defended White Tiger and he still wound up dead. Like, we're defending this guy and he's ripping off teachers. Like, is this work that we're doing even really mattering? Like, it's not really making a difference. Like, even if we try to do good things, bad things are still happening despite it. Like, it doesn't matter. So I think we're really starting to see that swing back into him realizing that he's probably going to do more good as Daredevil, but how does he balance that with what he's got currently going on in his life? And it's just this fun back and forth that they're playing with that all season that I really appreciate.
Yeah, because you learn that Bullseye is asked for Matt to come speak to him at the prison, and he's asking for me. I mean, this is Foggy's killer that wants to speak to him. So he ends up going to the prison and speaking to him. We've already seen that he's pretty beat up and scratched up and stuff as well. But it was a funny scene, but it's also what you're talking about. You're seeing this downward spiral. You're seeing Matt get out of control, that he's losing the grip on Matt and becoming more Daredevil, because they're having the conversation, but Bullseye's like, well, you have to release me for me to tell you any more information I do. And he smashes his head against the table and really beats him up. And a funny part is Matt is like, excuse me, guard. He smashed his face against the table. Oh, you crazy. Like, the guard doesn't even question. He's like, oh, yeah, he's just crazy. Like, he just did that. A blind lawyer's not going to put his hands on him. That he just beat his own head into the table and stuff. It was a funny moment, but it doesn't take you out of the episode because you realize just how Matt is losing himself and how this corruption of everything. We don't know security guards corrupt, but when you look in a room that you have a blind lawyer and a serial killer in the same room, he's going to pick that it was a serial killer did something stupid.
Right. That was a fun interaction, but he before he goes to see him, he shows up at Josie's bar, the site where Foggy was killed, and he's just kind of standing out there, and she opens the door and invites him in, and they have a drink.
Yeah, we learned that hasn't been open since Foggy passed away.
Right, and she makes a comment about don't even know if the neighborhood wants it to be open at that point, but they share a drink. Cherry shows up. They have a conversation, and Matt kind of comes to this realization that he feels that, Foggy's death may have actually been premeditated, and it wasn't just an accidental thing that happened because they were trying to get to him. Like, they were trying to get to Foggy. Like, they knew Foggy was going to win this case, that he was kind of celebrating a little prematurely that he was going to win, that he was confident he was going to win, and he winds up, being killed in that first episode. And that just sets him off even more, that he goes to talk, and that's what he's hoping to get out of this conversation with Bullseye that leads to him trying to ask to get Matt to let him out so he'll tell him what happens. And Matt's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. But
yeah, and he gets all that from because Josie says Foggy ordered a certain drink. He's like, that's not Foggy's drink. I'm like, I know what my regulars order.
Yeah.
That's what he ordered. And then that put that light bulb. He was celebrating early. He knew he was going to win that case.
Yeah.
So someone was trying to put a stop to it. And so that starts unraveling things. And going back to Matt and Heather, that envelope that she was given by Fisk's right-hand man was inviting her to the black and white ball. And, you know, Heather, after they're kind of done with their argument and Matt's trying to leave because he's got the all hands to go to, she's like, are you going to come to it with me? Like, I wasn't invited. And she's all snarkily is like, and guest. Like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll go. But you get to see more, like, when the ball finally happens, and the ball is kind of the last big scene of this episode, is that, you know, she's definitely still very emotional when she's there, and she's calling Matt and not getting a hold of him because he's there with Bullseye and doing all this other stuff, but she thinks he stood her up, because we're seeing that relationship start to crumble a little bit, and we get kind of a big moment between them here at the end at the ball, because when he finally does show up, he doesn't confess who he is, but he confesses, like, Fisk is a very dangerous man. You cannot have anything to do with him. I'm going to make Fisk show you who he really is and everything during this ball. But we also, at the same time, Fisk is taking people in a back room, and we get him with a decent conversation with the swordsman. He's like, well, I know before you answer, he's like, so what kind of donation can I expect from me? And the swordsman looks at him like, excuse me? Like, you're expecting me? Oh, before you do that, should I call you the swordsman, the vigilante? And kind of is blackmailing everybody who goes in that back room to give him some money. And you get some interesting scenes there with the swordsman, because he's also talking to, you know, a widow or a woman about her husband. And, you know, some interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what he actually has to do with this series, if he's just a cameo to tie more stuff in, or if he's going to play a bigger part of maybe helping Matt and the Punisher in the next episode, or if we're actually going to see him as the swordsman, because you really haven't seen between Hawkeye and here. You know, we saw one little clip of him in like a fencing, everything else, but you haven't really seen him as the vigilante swordsman yet. That's going to be really interesting if he actually is going to end up being the vigilante, and we start seeing vigilantes come out again because of everything that ends up happening here at this ball.
I have a feeling we're going down that path, because there's a whole lot of stuff that we haven't seen yet and expecting to see, and there's only one more episode left in the season, and I think that's where the whole hype about episode 9 has been. Like, it's supposed to be the craziest episode of the season, and you're supposed to get a lot of wild stuff in it, and I just have a feeling you're going to see these vigilantes kind of coming together to, you know, stop this anti-vigilante task force who's already running roughshod over the city and beating up citizens and doing like all kinds of
we get that going a bit deeper in this episode.
You got a deeper dive into that here, where, you know, people are starting to file lawsuits, and Wilson, who is very much at the peak of his confidence and his bravado at this point, because he's getting warned about certain things and he's just ignoring it, like, oh, they dove deep into this. This was LaGuardia's desk that I was sitting at, that I was obsessed with a few episodes ago, that they call back to. And he's just at his peak, like I said, peak confidence, peak bravado here, because
peak cockiness.
He feels that, you know, he's untouchable now. Like, he's the mayor of the city. Like, he could do literally anything he wants and call it the law because he's been appointed to do so, kind of thing. And it's really like getting out of control here at this point, to where he's strong-arming, you know, the wealthy, and, you know, has his own private task force who is going and just doing literally whatever he needs them to do.
And that task force is security for this ball that he's hosting.
Right. And it's a big deal. You get some of the other undertone threads. He's promoted Daniel to Minister of Communications, and, you know, leading up that stuff, and you get a fun back and forth between him and BB, who shows up at the party as well, who's kind of off doing her own thing. Like, she's acquiesced a little bit to have stuff put out that was corroborating what Fisk was saying about the task force, but while at the same time she's investigating the task force. And there's some fun story threads that I think are going to be pushed into season 2. I think that they're going to kind of deal with, if I could predict a little bit ahead, but the last few minutes of this episode are really heavy in this ball scene where you get, Matt finally showing up and, having this conversation with Heather before the end of the episode.
Yeah, because we end up going back to Bullseye, who, after having his head smashed and everything, is sent to the doctor, to the ward, to get stitched up and stuff, and they get him all stitched up, and the guard comes over to release him, but Bullseye attacks him, and he's breaking off one of his own teeth and using it as a projectile because he's Bullseye. He can use pretty much anything as a projectile to take people out, and he takes out the guard, he takes out the doctor, and he ends up escaping in a police uniform and a guard uniform. And of course he uses the badge, he gets on the bus, another guard looks at him like, rough day. And he's like, like, yeah, that's a serial killer convict that you're talking to, and not an actual guard.
Nobody knows what he looks like.
And we actually end up getting Bullseye showing up at the ball, so we don't know exactly at first who he's going after, because we do get some scenes as he's kind of making his way through the elevator. We have the task force has caught a waiter who's taking pictures, and they go in the back room with him, and they find out that he's press and stuff, and they're going to dip him into boiling oil into a fryer, and he gets stopped by the commissioner, and the commissioner's going off on him, but he's like, that would have been bad. And then he dips his hand in there. He's like, I don't answer to you anymore. I don't work for you anymore. You have nothing to do, like showing that the task force is above and beyond anything now, that even the commissioner, which led up to that interesting conversation between BB and the commissioner, because he calls her out like, yeah, it's an interesting article you put out and everything. It looks like you gave in, because you and I both know it was Daredevil. And because that conversation with Daniel was like, well, he just threatened you the last time you two were together, and now you're kind of talking like your friends. Like, she's being a reporter. She's keeping her enemies close to see what she can get, and ends up talking to the commissioner like, hey, I don't always put everything out under my name. Because he brings up, like, you do know who was involved with your uncle's murder, don't you? And she's like, yep, I do. Yep. So he's like, you ever want to talk, let me know. And he's like, you know what? I've got some documents on pretty much every single person on that vigilante task force. She's like, okay. So they come to that agreement like, we're going to speak later, and we're going to see what comes out. So you've got kind of that thread that's going to start maybe unraveling Wilson's world, while, as we talked about, Bullseye is heading up, and he ends up heading up to Crow's Nest, and over top of the entire ball where there was a guard. He's not there anymore, and takes his rifle, and you see him pointed at Fisk, and you see him pointing at Vanessa, and you're not exactly sure who he was going after, because, we get to that point that I was alluding to where Matt is telling Heather, like, I'm going to confront Kingpin. You're going to see who he is. So you see him marching straight at Fisk, and then here comes Vanessa in a spotlight to take him off to dancing, and he's like, all right, you're going to have to lead. So they go out there and dance and just bump into each other, and Matt gets to reveal to Vanessa what he's kind of found out.
Yeah, so they have this fun little, like, whisper conversation as they're dancing. Like, he's like, did you find what you were looking for, Devil? Like, just
like Fisk knows he can hear him because of his super hearing.
Mm-hmm. So he's kind of messing with him while they're dancing, where just the two of them can hear. And, they start to dance, and then he winds up, cutting in and stealing Vanessa away from Fisk. And you have these dueling conversations between both Matt and Vanessa, and then Fisk and Heather, where, Fisk is low-key about to tell Heather, like, your boyfriend's not who he says he is. You know why he's obsessed with me? Like, cause, she's still playing off this whole, like, she doesn't know who Matt is, obviously, as Daredevil, but she feels like he's losing this, like, he's very mentally troubled, because, she's psychoanalyzing him the entire time. And, thinks he's just got this unhealthy obsession with Fisk, and she doesn't know why. And Matt's like, Fisk is about to reveal to her that he's very much Daredevil, like, trying to get there. But you also have, at the same time, this conversation between Matt and Vanessa, where Matt's pretty much telling Vanessa, I know it was you that made the call to put the hit on Foggy. Like, it wasn't Wilson, it was you, because Fisk was away when this happened. You were here. This was you that put it into it. And she goes to try to leave, and he pulls her back, and they have this conversation. And she's like making the same threat. Does Heather know you're Daredevil? Is is she aware of who this is? And
she also seems like she was going to say something else about Foggy, but she was cut off. So that's leaving everybody who's seen this episode like, wait, is she alluding to something else that she didn't get to say?
Yeah, so there's some mystery there, but you get to the end of this episode and Matt hears the gun cock from upstairs in the crow's nest. Like, he looks up and he sees that it's Bullseye getting ready to shoot Fisk. So he sees the gun. He thinks it's Fisk that put the hit out on him, and he goes to shoot Fisk. Well, Matt, and for reasons we still don't entirely know yet, goes and takes a bullet for Fisk. Like, he goes and jumps in front of him and takes a bullet to the shoulder, and he starts to bleed out on the floor. And that's where this episode ends. You leave with a bloody Matt just laying down there on the floor, bleeding
and the
out.
The sound of his heartbeat just getting slower and slower and slower.
As he's bleeding out there, and you got Heather, falling to his side, trying to, get him to fight through it. But it was a very powerful ending to this episode that, is going to have to play out in this last episode that we've got coming up this week. I'm so excited to see how they're going to finish this season. I can't believe we're finally to the end now of this season that we've waited so long for. I feel like we've been talking about this show for pretty much since they stopped making Daredevil the last time, like on Netflix when it left several years ago. And, we've gone through these 8 episodes now, and this episode, man, it packed a heavy punch. Like, it moved a lot of stuff forward to this supposedly crazy season finale that we're going to get that, if I were to guess, leaves us on some kind of cliffhanger, but we don't know what that's going to be yet.
Yeah, and we said in the last episode review that this episode 8 here was one of the pretty much the first episode that the new creative team did all on their own. Like, this was separate from anything. I think they worked on episode 1 as well, but 8 and 9 were the first ones that were fully under them. And it kind of showed it did have a little bit of a different feel to it. You saw them going through and trying to conclude and wrap up a lot of stuff that was done before so they can move it forward in a different way. But yeah, you've got a lot to wrap up in 9 because we do know that we see the Punisher again. That's already been shown off everywhere else. We know things are coming to a point where Matt's as Daredevil, his and Heather's relationship is on the edge here. We got to see what's going there. We've got Vanessa and Fisk. They seem like they've reconnected. Fisk had a line in this episode, like, if I cannot be with you, I cannot be. Like, letting her know, like, I can't exist without you. And you see a little bit that they might be coming back together, but we've got Bullseye on the run again. We've got a lot to kind of wrap up. We've got a mystery that it was Vanessa with Foggy and everything else. Like, we've still got quite a lot to wrap up here. So we're going to have a lot of mystery going to season 2, and whether that's because the new creative team wants to do their own thing to wrap stuff up, but I've really enjoyed it. This was a solid episode that gave us a lot of heart and depth, that just kind of took that mess of Heather and Matt's relationship, of Vanessa and Fisk's relationship, of closing out Adam, of bringing Bullseye back into the mix, of bringing Foggy back into the mix with, learning that Vanessa set up the hit on that. And it set up a really interesting episode 9 to finish off this season. So like we're heading into it, and it really makes me interested in it, that we've heard and we know, as you mentioned, episode 9 is apparently really crazy, and I cannot wait. This is where the weekly episode gets you like, all right, we already know episode 9 is going to be crazy. Can I have it already, please? I want to watch it. I don't want the season to be over, but I want to see how crazy it is.
Yeah, because it's going to be exciting to see the conclusion that they bring to this season, where they leave things, where they set up things to go forward in season 2, because we know they're already in the middle of shooting that already. Like, they're full force into production on that, so it's exciting that there's a bright future ahead for this show for the next season. But there's a lot of stuff to get figured out in this last episode. That stuff's really coming to a head, and we'll see how the whole situation with Matt being shot and bleeding out on the floor, how that plays out. Is this the cause for vigilantes to come full force? Does Matt get revealed as Daredevil to everybody? Does everybody become aware of it now? Kind of like a Spider-Man reveal where everybody knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man now because of some crazy public reveal.
I have a feeling Heather's going to find out, but we'll see if she ends up surviving through this final episode too.
And then that's a tricky subject to wind up to, because you kind of feel like she's going to meet some kind of grim fate at this point, I think. But we'll see how it all plays out, man. I've been really digging this show. I'm so happy we got it back, and like, this has been a lot of fun to go with on this episodic journey that we're on.
And I feel episode 9 is going to be one you have to watch when it drops. It drops Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. You're going to have to watch it when it comes out, because I feel like if it is as crazy as the reviewers that have got early access to it have said, it's going to be talked about and it's going to be out there that you got to watch it when it drops. But the first 8 episodes of Daredevil Born Again are on Disney Plus to watch now. The finale will drop this upcoming Tuesday at 9 p.m. You better turn in right when it debuts if you don't want anything spoiled for you, because, as we've heard, it's going to be a crazy one.
Yeah, the buzz around it is very strong, and it's going to be very spoiler heavy. Like as soon as that drops, and probably the next day, you'll start seeing like all kinds of crazy stuff about it. So if you're one of those that doesn't watch it when it drops and you wait a day or two, it's probably best to avoid social media to avoid having that spoiled for you for sure.
Yeah, but it's crazy. We're already here, the end of season 1 of Daredevil Born Again, after what it was just the 10th anniversary of the first season of Daredevil on Netflix was just the other day.
It's crazy.
And now we've got it back again, and we're one episode away from wrapping up the season.
I'm so happy for that. I'm excited to get our eyes on that episode as well. So another reminder for folks, we mentioned it in our last episode, but if you go to willbringthepopcorn.com/giveaway, you could be entered for an opportunity to win one of these prizes that are sitting in front of us here. We have 2 $25 Gold Star gift cards, thanks to our friends at Gold Star for hooking us up with that. We also have 2 bottles of Mike's Hot Honey, thanks to the people at Mike's Hot Honey for the hookup on that. We've got a bottle of their regular and their extra hot honey. Fantastic products. We love them. We use them ourselves. And, go to willbringthepopcorn.com/giveaway for your opportunity to enter. No purchases required, but enter it in. Get a chance to win some of these cool prizes. We're excited to give them away.
This will run through the May 3rd. We'll announce the 4 winners on our episode that follows that. So, make sure you get in there and get entered to win. And maybe if it does well enough, we'll throw in some extra prizes. I've got some extra goodies that I've picked out and that we've picked out to put in here. So you might be getting a little bit more than what we show here, but we want to leave a little fun and extra surprise. We are able to grab some memorabilia and other stuff from different films and toss it in for you. But make sure you enter to win, and you've got the rest of this month to enter.
Always happy to give stuff away. This is a ton of fun. We enjoy doing this a lot. And everybody seems to like the extra stuff that we throw in when they win. So get in there, get your entries in, and we'll have that winner announced on May 5th.
And so coming up this week is a movie that we have been waiting for a while now. This outside of Fantastic Four and Superman and some of our bigger comic book tentpole movies, along with the Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, Sinners has been one that we've been waiting for since we've heard. It's Ryan Coogler, Michael B. Jordan, Haley Steinfeld, this period vampire piece. It's finally coming out. It's already getting huge buzz. We cannot wait to see it. We've been... as soon as we heard Ryan Coogler's doing a vampire film, we're like, all right, we're in.
Yeah, excited. The trailers for it look phenomenal. Excited to check that one out and review it next week.
This is a big week for On Demand. So on April 11th, we have the Alto Nights, which is the mob film that we feels like it came out last week, and it's already coming out on digital. Robert De Niro playing a dual role in it. You'd think would get some people in it, but not many people turn out. We haven't got a chance to go see it in theaters yet. And when we talk of this problem, there's so much stuff that's coming out in theaters that you have so many things kind of being shoved in, and this kind of felt one that was, you've got Minecraft and you've got so many other big movies are coming out, and you've kind of putting these films in there. It's hard for people to get out and see them if they're maybe going to go see those big tentpoles first, and then they'll go see the smaller independent films later, because there's more risk of spoilers and everything else coming out of those big tentpole films. Right. But you're just not getting enough time in theaters. If you wanted to go maybe check out a cheap Tuesday day to go check out some of these smaller films that you didn't get a chance to check out, well, like Alto Nights, it's already out on demand for purchase and buying. So a lot of people are like, well, it's already out here, then how much longer till streaming before I can just watch it for free, or not free, but already what I pay?
Yeah, it's we've beaten that topic to death, I think, at this point, just because, we feel so impassionate about it. But yeah, this is one that we wish we could have gotten to see, but we didn't get a close enough showing to us to really make it out to go see it. But that's a larger problem with some of the smaller, less tentpole heavy films that get a chance to come out. They get a little bit more of a limited release, or not every movie theater chain gets access to it. And there's an audience that could potentially miss out on a film like this because they don't even get the opportunity to see it in the theater, to have the option to pick it. So, I mean, it's It's tough, man. I mean, you get a big star like Robert De Niro, who's widely considered one of the best actors of all time, and it's a film that unfortunately didn't do as well as people thought it would.
Yeah, or you just can't make. Maybe it only had. I think the alternates may only had a couple show times, and one may have been when you're not off work yet, and the other's like 10 o'clock at night. Like, well, do I really want to go see a mob film at 10 o'clock at night? You don't have a whole lot of options on when you could see it. But yeah, that's one we're looking forward to checking out. But it's already on demand, and April 15th is a big drop day here. So we have Captain America: Brave New World. Go back in our archives to see our review of that. That's been a controversial Marvel film, very mixed among everybody. It is out on digital for purchase. We also have The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes film. Again, that was, along with Alter Nights, came out when we were just really busy with, I had stuff with the family, and we had a bunch of other movies. It's one like we want to support in the theaters, but it was one also, I think it didn't show up in our theater until after the release date. That we didn't see it on release day, but it came out a little bit after, but only had a couple showings that we couldn't make it to.
Yeah, and it was a very, very short, limited run in the theaters, but one I'm excited to check out when it drops finally. But just another one we wish we could have supported, man. It just didn't get the opportunity to, but now it's on demand, so we'll get to see it that way.
As we got Ketchup Entertainment, who put that out, is the one that saved the Acme versus Coyote movie and is going to release that in 2026. So if maybe on demand, we can get that one to be seen very well if people want to see the Looney Tunes still be made, because after Acme and Coyote, it could be the last thing that we see of the Looney Tunes.
For a long time, it could be, until somebody decides to revive it again.
Hey, we also have A Working Man. Again, go back in our archive, see what we thought about that. And The Woman in the Yard, the horror film that, again, another one we wanted to check out, but we didn't get a chance because all of these, other than Captain America: Brave New World, which has actually had a longer run in theaters than most, as you expect from a Marvel film, even though it didn't do as well financially as they expected to do, even with that longer run. A lot of these were put out around at the same time and already hitting on demand within that 18-day window.
Yeah, really short theater run, but definitely one worth checking out that we're excited to do it. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. Once again, we can't thank you enough for continued support. Go to WillBringThePopcorn.com for all our information. Go to WillBringThePopcorn.com/giveaway to enter into our merch giveaway here for these prizes you see before you. But coming up next week, we are going to be reviewing the Michael B. Jordan film Sinners. Very excited to check that one out. We also got a really cool opportunity to go to an extra advanced screening of the new Ben Affleck, John Bernthal film, The Accountant 2. So we are going to be seeing that early and bringing you an early review for that. It doesn't normally drop until the following week, but we're getting extra early access to it. We're going to be reviewing that too. And of course, we will be reviewing the season finale, episode 9 of Daredevil Born Again. So excited to check that episode out and talk about it. The exciting season finale that's hopefully going to have the world talking. We're excited to talk about that one as well. But until next week, I'm Josh, he's Brad, and we'll see you then.